Well, good evening, everybody. I want to take this opportunity and welcome you to our Hendersonville Regional Planning Commission meeting for Tuesday, September 5th, 2017. Glad you all are here tonight. Let's make a note that we have all commissioners present with the exception of Keybrant McCormick, who is en route from what I understand her little vehicle issue, and she'll be here momentarily. So with that, and without objection, we're going to continue on. We start with public hearings, and we have 3 public hearings tonight. The first one is a request by Ed Crowley to rezone 101 Tennessee Way from industrial to general commercial. And I have nobody signed up for that hearing, so I will declare that hearing closed. The next hearing is for FM Investments and Seaside Investments to rezone 8 and 13 Industrial Boulevard from heavy commercial to general commercial. And we have nobody signed up for that hearing, so we'll declare that hearing closed. And then the third public hearing tonight will be public request by Pate Montgomery to rezone from office plan development OPD to general commercial plan development GCPD, and to approve a revised preliminary development plan for the property identified as parcel 17 on Sumner County property tax map 159J, located on the south side of East Main Street, east of Maple Road Boulevard. And we do have 2 people signed up for that particular hearing. If you'll come to the podium, Mr. Charles Kimbrough, and please give us your name and address, and love to hear what you have to say.
I'm Charles Kimbrough. I live at 48 Windermere. I lived at 102 Burris for a number of years, property immediately behind this existing PUD. Just a little 10-second history. I sat where you're sitting for 25 years, 10 of them as chairman, and this property was zoned an office PUD while I was on that on your commission. After I came off the commission and spent a few years doing some other things, I then began consulting with land developers and builders and so forth, helping them with zoning and site plan approval. But I always said to my friends who were still on the commission at that time, I think most of them are probably dead now, but I always said to them, I'll never ask you to vote for something that I wouldn't have voted for. And on at least 2 occasions, since I have been doing this consulting, I've had developers approach me about representing them on this PUD to get it changed to commercial, and I turned them down. And I'll give you just a little quick history on it. I'm here primarily, it's not that I'm overwhelmed with ethical grief here. My little sister asked me to come. She still lives on the road where the house is back up to this piece of property. And she remembered the conversations that we had. Back in the late 80s, Tom Beatty, who's here tonight, a very respected developer and builder in our community for many years, came to see my sister and perhaps some of the other neighbors and said he wanted to do something there. The neighbors recognized that while there were 2 houses already on Main Street in that property, there weren't going to be any more. Nobody else was going to build a house on Main Street. I got a feeling the fellow that built the one in front of Scottish Highlands is having some second thoughts. It's sure staying on the market for a while. And so since that time, one of those houses has been taken down. Dr. Bill Burris's house was taken down. That's where Simmons Bank is now. The neighbors agreed that probably an office PUD would be a good buffer between them and Main Street and the things that might be happening on Main Street, across the street. And so with the support of most of the neighbors, this body recommended the zoning change to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, and they made that change. Now I realize no board can commit a later board. Board can always, except for bond issues and borrowings, any new board can undo anything any old board has done. But as a practical matter, the board representing the city sort of made a deal with these people that, you know, if you'll go along with this PUD office zoning, that's what it'll be. And they went along with it, and that's what it's been. It's actually half developed. Mr. Beatty's 2 buildings and Simmons Bank. One house still there, Jack Alexander's. It's my understanding he intends to stay there as long as he lives. No doubt at that point in time that house will come down because it's part of the PUD, also the office PUD. This is not really a question about architecture. It's not a question about the appearance of the building. Nobody questions the competence of the developer or what they want to do. It's just that it is a commercial use. It is a totally different use than the neighbors agreed to with the city when the office PUD was put in. And that's their reason for opposing it. And as I say, this was my reason for not having already been up here trying to get the zoning changed on it before now. This developer wouldn't have had a shot at it if we'd have done that. But would ask you to consider recommending to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen that they leave it like it was put back in the late 80s. Mr. Beatty put 2 nice buildings. The bank, that PUD zoning, PUD office zoning allows financial services, professional services, so forth. So the banks fit in with that. Storage is a totally different use. It is a commercial use. And on their behalf, at least on behalf of my sister and the Beatties, I'm asking you to please not recommend this rezoning change. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kimbrough. The next is Chuck Roten. If you would just introduce yourself at the microphone, and be happy to hear what you have to say.
I'm Chuck Roten, and I live at 116 Burris Avenue, and I'm against your project in rezoning the property. I have a petition here from about 60 people I'd like to give you.
Thank you.
Ask yourself, what will this project do for Hendersonville? How many jobs is it going to create? You know, we've got a responsibility for our kids for jobs. We need some good jobs in this town. We need it bad. You can look on Vietnam Veterans Boulevard and you can see the people going to Nashville. And we need our jobs here. And it's one of the best pieces of property on Gallatin Road. And Mr. Montgomery's wanting to take the heart out of these 3 lots, Mr. Alexander and Mr. Burris, and he's wanting to take the heart out of it and put a warehouse there. The warehouse is not going to support our economy. The money that comes in to the warehouse is going to leave Hendersonville. There's not going to be any employees there that's going to go for lunch or to go to Kohl's and buy tennis shoes for the kids. It's just it's dead, you know, and this board does not have the obligation to change the zoning for him so he can put a warehouse there, you know. And it's my desire that you would put, you know, we could keep it like it is, and it needs to be developed as a whole, you know, not just one lot and one lot and one lot. It needs to be a whole, and I don't know how that would work. Somebody smarter than me would have to do that, you know. But I hope that you can keep the zoning like it is, and I appreciate your time, and thank you for the work that you do for the city.
Thank you, Mr. Roten. Well, that is the last speaker for that hearing, so we'll declare that public hearing closed. Moving on to item number 3, request for information and assistance. Does anybody have anything? Hearing none. Additions to the agenda. Anybody? Hearing none. We have the minutes for August 1st, 2017. Do I have a motion? Moved by Millsap, second by Stringfellow. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Minutes of August 15th, 2017. Do I have a motion? Okay, moved by Bristol, second by Ms. Stringfellow. Any comments? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Carries. Any abstentions? Okay. Consent agenda items, we have several. I'll run the list real quick, but I would consider a motion to just move those in block if you'd like. Millstone, Phase 4, Section 2, Millstone, Phase 5, agreed all staff comments. Eagle View, they agree. Durham, Phase 2, they agree. Hunt Club, there's an agreement. Hunt Club Phase 11, there's an agreement there. Hunt Club Phase 12. I have a motion to move in block.
Motion to move in block.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second? So we have a second by, first by Mr. Atkinson, and then second by Ms. Atchley. All in favor to move them in block, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. So we're back to the main motion on consent agenda item. We're moving in block. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. So carried. So ordered. We now move down to the final plats. We have Hunt Club Phase 9, and we do have a disagreement on Public Works comments 2 and 3. Mr. Free, who's going to handle this one?
I think Mr.
Boyd.
Let's see. So I had a comment regarding the payment in lieu for the frontage along Chute Lane. Is standard that whenever we have a plat that has frontage along a city street, that we, require improvements that are not already there. And in this case, there's pavement width that's needed, curb and gutter, sidewalk, drainage. And I think I had a comment concerning the throughway stop is now that's acceptable, no longer a comment. But I think the outstanding issue is that the payment in lieu that's needed.
Okay, refresh us, Mr. Boyd. What are we looking for in payment in lieu of?
We require the road to be brought up to our standard, which is a full 12-foot lane, curb and gutter, any drainage associated with that, and sidewalk. In this case, the sidewalk is being replaced with a trail, so that's not sidewalk is not required because they're providing the trail. But all those other items are required, and it's typical that for these type of streets that we require a payment instead of them making improvements to the road. And it's similar, like we had Savannah come up several months ago, that where we tried to get improvements and we couldn't get improvements because it was a county road. But in this case, this is a city road, so we don't have the same problem.
Okay, we have somebody here. Okay, if you would just introduce yourself and express to us.
David Lucky, Southeastern Building. We're actually in disagreement on, there's some discussion on 8, but 3 and 8, which we can group. Items 1 and 2 seem to be an issue as well. 7 is the easy one, so we could probably knock it out of the way. 7, they've requested an additional 5 foot of right-of-way. The right-of-way there is already 50 feet and meets the requirement. We're fine giving additional right-of-way under item 7 if it's necessary, but we don't want it to count against our open space.
Okay. Well, let's go back. On our staff report here, it says you have an issue with items 2 and 3. Am I correct in stating that?
I have an issue with items 3 and 8, which we consider linked, 1 and 2, which we consider linked, and 7 I wanted to comment on.
Okay. Well, let's go back to the report then. Mr. Boyd, bring us up to speed a little bit on the on the items 1 and 2 that are linked, and then we'll move down to.
We, going back to the revision to the development plan, there was a a change to the trail that was shown. I think in the original plan for Hunt Club, there was, over 1,600 feet of trail shown as an amenity for that particular phase. In the revision, that amount was reduced down to about 500 feet. And I think Will and Fred, in working with the developer, reached a compromise to extend the trail along Chute Lane to Jack Anderson. And going back through the minutes and the transcribing the meeting, it was our staff's belief that we would like a payment in lieu for that remaining frontage along Chute Lane to make that connection to Jack Anderson, to make up the difference that was when the revision came in, there was less trail.
Okay, so it was approved on the original plan, then there was a revision made.
Yes, the original plan going back several years, it showed a certain amount of trail.
Right.
The revision came in last year, it reduced that, and staff comments, our interpretation of the staff comments reflected that a payment, either the trail of course be built or the payment be made, but realizing that's not, it's not their property, thought it would be easier for them to make a payment instead. So.
Okay, Mr. Lucky.
Okay. Two parts to this. One, we did reduce some trails in this phase. I don't believe there were 1,600 feet in this particular phase, but we reduced the number of footage in this phase, and we agreed to design the walking trail all the way around to Jack Anderson. We also agreed to install the bike ped path as noted with our construction plans and our plat that's submitted. We've agreed to that. In the May 3rd meeting minutes, we agreed to do the design work. There's nothing mentioned in these meeting minutes with us agreeing to pay in lieu of to build a walking trail up to Jack Anderson. I mean, it says it right here on the on the back side of this, and they've got a copy they're going to pass out. But I mean, there's three parts to this. One is Cal agreed to pay to design it. That's already in our construction plans. That's been submitted to the city, and it has been since May 5th. The second part of that is that we did not agree to build a walking trail on a piece of property that we don't own and would not improve or be otherwise required to improve payment in lieu of. And the third part of that is this piece of property is not even in the city of Hendersonville. It's got the same characteristics as Savannah.
We don't, we're trying to get the transcription of this May 3rd meeting. We just received this
Sure.
ourselves. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Lucky. I'm so sorry.
No, that's all right.
But we do need to, all commissioners, I think, need to have a copy of this. So how many more copies do we need? There should be enough. Does everybody have? I've got.
Maybe more, we need 3.
Okay.
4.
4? Okay. I'll tell you what I'd like to do, since we're in the spirit of keeping this thing moving on for a little bit, Mr. Lucky, let's put a pin in this, and we're going to move on and try to take care of some quick business, and we'll come back to Hunt Club 9, okay? Because we need to, I think the commissioners need to have all this in place. You guys need to have these transcription minutes?
We're going to discuss them. I think that's approved.
Okay, that's what we need to do. So we don't have these copies in front of us. Give us a few minutes, we'll have it, and we'll come back to you in a minute, okay? Thank you. Okay, moving on now to preliminary and final development plans, and we'll at the next, we'll put this up in order as soon as we come back, so we'll just take a little bit of liberties here. But we're coming up on the preliminary and final development plans for Forest Park. And, I would guesstimate that there are many people in the room tonight that are here for that. Let me just kind of say that we have, this came into being in April, and there was a deferral in June. There was a traffic report given. We did have public comments for this particular development. We have heard from several residents over the course of these months. And so I think commissioners are really aware of what the issues are. And I think we're at a place now where the Planning Commission just needs to deal with the matter and go through the issues as we do, as we deliberate. So with that, we're going to move right to the Forest Park Limited Master Development Plan, and I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Free, and he's going to walk.
And my apologies for interrupting.
Yeah.
I believe that requires a motion to rearrange anything on the agenda. Just Brian can probably help us with that.
Well, it really does,
Okay.
but since we have an issue here where, Ms. Ashley, where we don't have all the stuff in place, we've already kind of agreed to the agenda. We would be happy to accommodate that. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Where's my turn?
All right.
I think we've done this, but I think we're okay. I mean,
Yeah, I really do, but if you'd like a motion, Ms. Ashley, we will.
unless someone's opposed to it, by consensus, we can agree to
Yeah.
get all of the information.
Yeah, I think we're on good ground here. We've got to work him in. And once again, it's not what we normally do, but at the same time, we need to have some information in front of us, and rather than wait on that. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to ask Mr. Free if he'll take us through Forest Park.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. I'm just going to go through fairly quickly some of the major issues to consider as you consider your decision tonight about the Forest Park development. I'm just going to hit these. These were all in the staff report, and in different variations. They've been in several of the staff reports of the last several meetings with this. And I'll hit one of the first issues to kind of consider as you're deliberating this tonight is the conformance of this plan with the with the land use plan and overall compatibility with the neighborhood. We discussed about this being a conservation subdivision and what that is, and I think we had talked about we've never had a conservation subdivision, and it's kind of the definition of what it is not fully defined. We had some different examples in our book that had some illustrations that gave some examples of that. I think generally the planning staff was thinking, 50% of open space or, would meet that. But then looking a little bit further, then, we also found out that on some of those things in our illustrations that were just in there as illustrations in the land use plan on conservation subdivisions, they deal with real intense high-density development, where that, for example, you would have multifamily, single-family, villas, townhouses, commercial with multifamily on the upper floors and things like that, and then have open space and a conservation area around that. So it really is not fully defined. So whatever the decision that we have tonight will be how we're kind of defining that on conservation development, conservation subdivision design. But it looks like this is the only place where this is actually possible. So this would be probably the first and the last time that we would have conservation design. Some of the things, looking at it, that this particular development does have about 38% of its of the conservation open space. And in looking at that, and looking at it at the quantity of it, but then also the quality, what the developer attempted to do here, from what we can see, is trying to conserve large trees and kind of design around that. Also create accessible open spaces, so that is something that that could be taken into account. Also, that the overall number of homes per acre with the proposed development is about 2.51. Under this conservation subdivision design standard district standards, you could have number of units per acre anywhere from 1 to 3 units an acre. And this kind of does fall within that. Another thing to kind of consider as we're looking at this is just compatibility, looking at the surrounding area, taking into consideration the densities of the adjacent development on that side of the street and across the street as well. I focused more on what's on that side of the street, A lot of the properties that are immediately adjacent to this property are larger, 2 to 5 acre tracts of land. The majority of those properties, I think there was about 50 plus properties that fit into that. The majority of those properties are located outside of the city limits, and most of them are located actually outside of our plan area. We're kind of at the edge of our plan area with this particular development. But taking into those things into consideration, the consideration of looking at the townhomes that are proposed in the development, is that appropriate? Does that fit the area? There are examples of villas and townhomes in Millstone and in other areas that are other parts along Saundersville that are there. But this on this side and within this particular area, it is a little bit different than what's there now. One of the next items to kind of consider is the one point of access. The developer has increased the number of access points, future access points. Initially, I think there were maybe 2 future stub points, and I think maybe it's closer to 5 now that they've added as far as for future access. But still, from a planning standpoint, just to consider that you don't have 2 major entrances right out the gate for the development or in the very near future. You've just got one large entryway coming in, and noted that entryway is substantially larger in size and design than a typical entryway might be. So just thinking about that from a point of access. The third thing to kind of consider that's an issue is the traffic and the need to improve Saundersville Road. No doubt anyone that's driven Saundersville Road, and especially the people that live out there, can see that there's already challenges. A lot of those are from the development that's occurred over the last several years. A lot of that is occurring with Station Camp, with the schools that are further out into the county and into Gallatin that have increased traffic along that way. Understanding also that we still have a little bit less than half of the development that's already approved for lots that could eventually be built on, that don't have to be rezoned. They're already approved to still build out. So that's without Forest Park or any other future development. And looking at that, looking at what is the responsible way to balance the existing road conditions and a substantial development like this that has 600 plus lot development on looking at a fair share, or what is a way that we could look at how a Forest Park development or any development of any substantial size in that area would help offset not just improvements to, like when we're talking about on-site improvements, that's like where this road connection, the east-west collector road that's going to be built, that's going to be kind of the spine of this development, where it goes on to Saundersville. That's something that we're considering on-site improvement. So there is a substantial investment there, but that's all on-site. When we look at off-site, that's just general improvements or significant improvements that we're looking to make to Saundersville Road. And so when we're looking to that, and we had the work session, we had the Banesh traffic study report that was done, kind of looking at long-term, what are the needs that we're going to have along Saundersville Road from a transportation system when we have full build-out. And that's kind of what the Banesh traffic report did. And what this traffic report did, and we talked about this at the last work session, we were already the city was moving forward and doing that prior to this development occurring. So we did, initially, we had the traffic report from the developer that every developer does when they're looking at proposing a development. But we were also already initiated and started working on this Banesh traffic study of Saundersville Road. So that's one reason this is kind of taking a little bit longer, is because we're like, well, we don't have much longer to go to get that full report, and let's kind of compare that so we can make a better decision as it relates to the off-site transportation improvements. And in that report, there were several different concepts, and it ranged in understanding that we're talking about a high-level look at this report. It's not, fine-tuned design and estimating, so the numbers might be a little bit more inflated than if we just actually bid it out today and, got different prices. But we got it ranging from doing nothing to the road, which would be $0, to maybe doing all the way to the high school that would include, redoing the bridge and widening the bridge that's over the creek and everything out there, to that being about $22 million. So we had from 0 to $22 million was kind of that range. Understanding that's a high level number. It could be less than that, and we talked about that at the work session, that we could certainly pick apart any piece of that estimate, and say, well, acquisition wouldn't be that much, or right away, and different things, or contingencies, could be lower, but that's just kind of the number that we had. So the real difficulty with this, and looking at, there wasn't something that exists. We did this with Durham Farms, Norman Creek, Fountain Brook, and I think there were a couple others. And we also did it, to some degree, did something different with Mansker Farms, where we changed, that per lot cost to get that. But in looking at those things, really, there was no way to really tell how that number was actually calculated. It was a number that was come up with. Probably it was set to something, but we really didn't have a good way to determine how that was actually calculated. So looking at how do we calculate this, and how do we come up with a range of what a reasonable off-site improvement would be, was very difficult. And that's been a difficulty in working through this process. But one of the things, and you have it in your packet, you can see where I've taken concept 5, which was the $12.3 million, $12.2 million concept, that basically 4 lanes, about half of the Saundersville, and then improves the rest of it with a 2-lane with the proper turning lanes and everything all the way out, just to the Hendersonville city limits. It doesn't include the bridge. So looking at that, you can see what I have for concept 5A, A through 5D, and it ranges anywhere from 12 million to 497,000. And looking at this particular development, how much would that be a lot if it was Forest Park picking up the whole tab? That'd be 12.2 million, and that would be 18,688 per lot. Looking at that, then looking down below 4A, which we've kind of decided near term what we want to pursue is concept 5, but concept 4 is a implementation of concept 5. So what we might do in concept 4, that was 1.357 million, that would actually further concept 5. It would start building on that. So when I look at that, and I look at, if Forest Park paid all of that cost, it was 1.357 million, or $2,078 per lot. And if I, all the way down to, if they only paid 20.4% of all the cost, it was just 276,000, which gets it down to $424, a lot, per lot. So looking at that, I was trying to establish what might be a fairly reasonable basement level figure, and then a fairly reasonable high level figure. And then coming up with that, then looking at that, then the recommendation from the planning staff and working with the engineering department, that came up with $2,100 per lot, which, if you look on that page, shows kind of what the possible build out could be, would be $1.371 million in total off-site improvement cost. And this would be a little bit different. It'd be about 82% more than what we were getting at the previous developments. And then one thing that would be different is, in previous developments, we were getting $250 up front for all lots when they record the plat. In this case, we felt that we needed money to make a difference right away. So we're requesting that it be 1,000 upfront per lot, which would be 653,000 upfront. And then that would give us a total of the 1.371 million. And the idea would be is on that number, and we just needed to have a number that we could start with at least. And if this number was used, then the idea would be we are pursuing getting a full design for Concept 5 of Saundersville to start this thing moving. We don't have it in the tip. We don't have it in long range really plan on the improvement through the state. With Saundersville, we don't have really money set aside to actually do significant improvements, but to get started on that is do the full concept design. And the idea would be if this development or another similar development paid this amount, we would utilize that amount and start making the needed improvements to implement Concept 4, which is basically the different intersections are not, they don't have the proper turn lanes, for people to stack up. So, as you're driving down through there, when it is busy, if somebody's going left or right and it starts stacking up, that's what's creating a significant part of the problem out there. And that's kind of, these funds would be utilized here in the near term to start making those improvements. So that's kind of the idea of that with the offsite improvements. And just to come up with kind of a rationale of how we got there, and then to have an actual number, because that's one of the things that we talked about was that we need a number to start with, and looking at something that was reasonable, to do. We do not have development impact fees. If we had development impact fees, the calculation of this would be completely different. But in lieu of that, it's a negotiated off-site improvements for planned developments in this case. And that's just kind of an overview of those major things to consider in your deliberation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Free. We'll now hear from the developer, and I think Mike Stanton, if you want to speak, introduce yourself and give us a synopsis real quick, and
all right.
See what we can do.
Did you need that?
Yeah, just for a second. I will be brief. We've all invested a lot of time and energy, and on our side, a lot of money to get where we are, and feel good about Forest Park. Can you go ahead and start the slideshow so I can go through? I'll skip right to the issues that Keith brought up, just so that for the sake of time, we've all seen our entrance, very high quality. The amenities, second to none in the city of Hendersonville. To explain quickly where we came up with on the CSD, this is out of your land use plan, and it clearly indicates that there's 300 acres. In that 300 acres, it'd be 900 units. So when we started designing it, first off, we went out to the site and we saw the tree masses, and we decided amongst ourselves before we ever went down the CSD path that this is the appropriate thing to do. And it's what we felt was right for the property. As we did more research, we realized that we were on the right path. The CSD area consists of not just the Jenkins Farm, which is this, but also the Norman Farm. Collectively, and that's part of the problem, is you can't look at Jenkins individually, you got to look at it collectively. When you look at it collectively, it's 2.26 units an acre. So Forest Park, as you can see in this image, has most of that developable area, which is why that we have more density than the other two farms, one being developed and one has not. One was approved, one has not been approved yet. I sent a letter as part of our answer to the staff report, and I'm not sure if you got it. It talks about CSD. I know Randall Arendt is who this land use plan was patterned after. I want to briefly read just an excerpt from that. The staff report questions whether Forest Park qualifies as a CSD since it does not meet the suggested 50% open space referenced in Randall Arendt's book, and also is illustrated in the land use plan. This comment was taken from the article Conservation Design versus Typical Cluster Development on the Randall Arendt's website. This is the comment. Many cluster regulations provide for only a marginal reduction in lot size and are therefore incapable of protecting a significant percentage of land and open space. By contrast, a basic tenet of conservation planning under Growing Green is that lot size minima are almost irrelevant, as overall density and minimum open space are both established another way. What he's basically saying is true conservation plans, and Keith alluded to it, is you compress everything into smaller areas, which means you're on smaller lots. The problem in Hendersonville is the regulations, and we haven't asked for variance in the regulation, but the regulation only allows 25% to be attached and a 60-foot wide minimum lot. So when you put all those together, the best you can do is get where we are. And so I think overall, I think we're providing high quality and quantity open space in Forest Park. We're also, as illustrated here, we are the least dense community on Saundersville Road at 2.51 units an acre. We're also the least as far as attached at 25%. All other communities are above that. So that's really on the CSD, and I wanted to be brief because I know your time is valuable. As far as the traffic, Keith, we've worked with staff, both engineering and planning, and we agree. Even though it's painful to admit that we're paying 4 times what any other development has, we see the benefit. And from day one, we've said with Forest Park, we want to make a difference in everything that we do. And that's from the community to the improvements. We're stepping up to the plate because we believe not only in Saundersville Road, but also in Forest Park. The one point of access has been, we've discussed that, and our Keith did an excellent job of explaining it is 33 foot wide, provides, our phase 1 is huge and provides plenty of redundant access throughout the development. And I believe the density we explained with the CSD, the 303 units an acre, and that's how we based on it. I've got Jim Harrison here with Civil Site that can answer any specific questions to the traffic improvements to Saundersville Road, and we've got slides up if we need to discuss that.
Okay, I'm just going to ask you guys just to hang there. So what I'd like to do now, commissioners, is let's go ahead and deal with the issues. So you basically got the conformance issues. You've got, or wherever you want to speak, you've got the one-point access, the traffic study, which of course Mr. Freeh's done an incredible job in bringing us through all this. But now it's time for your comments. And the other thing that I would like to just reiterate to us, and any rezone, and everybody knows this, but I just want to reiterate it. We really need to, in our motion, whichever way that we decide tonight, it can't just be a motion to recommend either approval or approval with conditions or denial. It really needs to also state in the motion the finding of facts. That's very, very important so that they when it goes on to the board, mayor, and alderman, they have a clear understanding as to why we did what we did. So with that, I would entertain any comments or questions that any of the commissioners might have for the applicant. Mr. Lee.
Mr. Chairman, we have discussed this development several times, and we're working with some developers that are high quality, high integrity. The plan that they have developed and presented to us, I think, is among some of the finest development that I have seen in our city. I have every reason to believe that they would follow through with what they want to do. However, when it comes to grounds for changing an amendment to existing zoning, you know, there will be no adverse effect upon adjoining property owners unless such effect can be justified by the overwhelming public good or welfare. And I'm afraid that with the traffic issues that already exist upon that road, with issues that would be compounded if current approved plans are fully developed, we would be placing an undue burden upon the citizens and the people of that community. And unfortunately, what we're dealing with is what a famous Baptist preacher once called payday someday. And there's going to be a payday someday for all of these things that we've already done. And unfortunately, this development and these developers are found in that bind, and I'm found there too, wanting to approve this program, but seeing that the road to get there is just too steep of a climb. And I think from the access points to the road improvements, things that will require the city to have a considerable amount of investment in doing so. I mean, in our last work session, I mean, I think we all were in agreement that at a minimum we needed to move towards Concept 5 just for what's already there. So what do we do then? Do we ask the development to pay the 20% of
$12 million
of the total project cost, which means the lot per cost is $3,812, which is so much more than we've asked anybody else to do? So I don't see how we can approve this until the city sorts this out with a proper impact fee and a revenue plan, so that we don't get into let's make a deal for every development that comes up here, and that we hold good developers in jeopardy and hold homeowners in jeopardy and citizens in jeopardy and people wanting to sell their farms in jeopardy. We're kind of holding them all up. So I have real concerns on those points and upon that basis.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Any other commissioners would like to speak? Yes.
And Mr. Lee, I appreciate your comment. The problem is, the problems exist now and will get worse. The city is not on the city's agenda that I'm aware of, that of anybody I've talked to with the city, that's a priority to fix anything out there. We're a developer standing here tonight saying we're going to share in the burden. Now keep in mind that the improvements that we're talking about are existing communities that are actively building. But we're still standing up here saying, we understand, but the city's in a position of, if you do nothing, nothing happens and it gets worse. And that, to me, seems like a worse position than approving Forest Park, who's standing here saying, we want to help.
Thank you. Any other commissioners? Ms. Stringfellow. There you go.
So I tend to agree. If we're not going to do anything to make the, I mean, I know what we said on our meeting, but if we're not going to do anything to the roads and they're going to continue to get worse, why would we not take money that we're not going to have ever if we don't do, I mean, this would be money to help at least to fix the roads, and you're still going to have the development on the other side, even if they didn't build. But it's just just doesn't seem, I mean, I know we're in a catch-22, we need the money, but we're getting free money to build the roads. Am I missing it?
Well, I don't think there's free money necessarily. I do understand your point, and I certainly agree with that point, that there is some money on the table to deal with. But I think the issue is really not a planning commission issue. It is a city of Hendersonville issue, and they have to put the house in order, again, to so that we can do our job as a planning commission properly, so developers can dream great projects and build great projects in our community, and that, again, that they not be held in jeopardy, citizens not be held in jeopardy, and so I mean, it's like preparing for the hurricane. And, we need this many gallons of water, but all I can get is 2 bottles of 16.9 ounces. Yeah, that'll keep us alive, and that'll help a little bit, but it really won't solve the long-term problem.
Anything else, Mr. Stringfellow? Okay.
No.
Any other commissioners like to speak on this issue? If not, do we have a motion? We need a motion of some sort.
I'm a minister every motion.
Go make it.
I'll just go ahead.
Yeah.
This is at least from my perspective, this is one case that we've dealt with over the years. It just seems gets more complicated the more we talk about it. And I'm not really sure that sort of environment would constitute sound financial planning and sound development planning. If we are no more certain than what we have heard laid out before us tonight, it's not that it may be a while, but we're no more certain that it'll ever come. And the developers have done a tremendous job of trying to help us sort through this by providing information, and as a member, I'm sure there are many others who appreciate that. Appreciate Mr. Lee and the staff trying to help us get a grip on this. And Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, that silence just a moment ago didn't make me feel any more confident. So, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the commission, in order to determine the will of this commission, I would make a motion that this arrangement, this report, that in essence becomes a motion, because we need to be sure that all the technical aspects, as you alluded to earlier, need to be traveling with it, and I would include those by reference.
It's a finding of fact, yeah.
To my motion, but I'm going to move that we forward this on to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen with the recommendation from the commission that this request be denied.
Okay. Do we have a second to that motion? Do I have a second? We have a second, Mr. Lee. It's now up for discussion. We're discussing the motion to deny. Well, Mr. Millsap did indicate in his motion that the technical aspects of the finding of fact would be based upon the traffic concerns, one-point access.
All that were discussed in the presentation from Mr. Lee.
Yeah, all that you discussed. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And included by reference to the document.
Yeah. So we have a motion on the floor and a second for denial, recommend denial. Do I have any commissioners wish to speak on the motion?
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Is there any other alternatives to Ms. Stringfield's point that we don't lose this funding? Are there any type of, and this may be a Keith question, that there are other options? I know that there's only so much federal money and that kind of thing. But are there any options to where the people who actually use the road pay in a portion of it? Because just like what happened on Stop 30, and we talked about that for hours, you know, the people who are using it don't actually even live on the road.
Right.
You know, we've got dump trucks coming through there and all that. So I just wondered if you were aware of any alternatives.
Well, we've looked at a lot of different things, and I
Okay.
think we talked about development impact fees, you know, last time, and we're looking into development impact fees, but it's something where there's so much development along Saundersville that's already been approved that a lot of it's vested.
Gotcha.
And so we can't tap that, and it's a lot, and we can't tap that, you know, for specific, like, targeted area to do those types of things. And this would be something, you know, depending on if we had a development impact fee, to be honest with you, actually, the way development impact fees work and the way they're calculated, you get credits for a lot of things, like building a road that's on the long-term transportation plan. So in this specific instance, they get credit for that, they get credit for the right-of-way of that, they get credit for where they're tying into Saundersville, and it's very possible in a development impact fee situation, depending on what the total is, it could come up to be substantially less, if not actually a negative in the other direction. It's possible, but that's just for this particular development, and it has to do with that east-west corridor, you know, portion that they're building. But there's really not another mechanism for that. The city, and tell me if I'm wrong on this, Marshall, the city is moving forward to do a detailed, actual, full-blown design for concept number 5.
Okay.
Okay, so that is moving forward, you know, to do that. It's a substantial investment that the city's making, you know, to do that. Regardless of how this turns out, the city recognizes that something needs to be done, and the first step is to design the road, and then pursue funding.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ashley. Ms. McCormick.
Okay, so bear with me because my voice is horrible. It's been going in and out. I think that's probably like an early Christmas present or something for my husband. I don't know.
Amen, sister.
I figured that. It's projects like these that make me not like this chair as much as I normally would. And I say that because this is the really hard choice. You know, I had a professor in law school that always said if it was easy, they'd give it away at Walmart. And this is kind of one of those where I feel like that. On the surface, I love this project. It is absolutely stunning. I love this project. It is definitely someplace I would live and would recommend my family to live. As well as the location's amazing. I mean, I love where the location was going. My concern, though, is the hurt for that area in terms of specifically traffic, etc. We talk about, and I struggle with feeling like, oh my goodness, we're going to lose the opportunity of having any funding to help the people that live on that street. You know, I remember watching TV and seeing Saundersville Road on the news and the story and the timing of how long it took to get to Vietnam veterans. And, you know, I didn't like to see negative press about Hendersonville. I never do. So I worry about adding to that problem. You know, I look at the money, and it's a significant amount of money and definitely not something I have in my sock at all. But I just worry that it's still not enough to fix the problem. It's kind of like if you have a bucket that's overflowing and you take a cup of water out, that's some good relief. My worry is that we're adding 2 cups to it. So to add the additional houses in this area without enough funding to really be able to do what we need to do to this road is a problem. Again, much respect to Mr. Stanton, amazing respect for the projects that he's brought before us, and this project, it concerns me. When I look at what's tasked before us of deciding whether this conforms to the type of, to the CSD specifically, I don't feel that this project, I feel this project comes short. to factor in, first of all, what was provided was an example, but to factor in another subdivision to make it conform to the CSD requirements, I don't feel is necessarily fair. When we are looking at any other project and we're looking at their open space, I don't feel it's fair for us to factor in the neighboring development to see if as a whole those two combined fit the neighboring space. So I understand the concepts, and had these been developed together, the argument might be different. And to benefit from the fact that that other property has a specific amount of open space doesn't seem to be fair. I worry about the precedent we would be setting for future developments to factor in neighboring subdivisions to make their plan fit within a specific amount or a specific requirement. So for that, and my personal opinion is I don't believe it fits the rural living CSD standard. In addition, I am concerned about the traffic, absolutely. And I applaud the fact that the density is lower than all the other areas. I go back to my initial statement that I love this project. I just don't love it for this particular place. So for that, I feel that I'm supporting the motion to deny.
Thank you, Ms. McCormick. Any other commissioners? Well, if there's no other commissioners, let me weigh in, and then if it's the commission's will, we'll call the question on the motion on the floor. I tend to agree with all the comments as far as the quality of development. I agree with the efforts of our developers, and understand the right that they would have to come in tomorrow and submit a site plan with the regular zoning that they have and could build. We could, and I would have every hope that they would turn in a good product, but still they would have that right. Would have no concessions on roads, so to speak, which goes to the other issue of, is it really fair to hold the developer totally responsible for the whole corridor of Saundersville Road? And we're not, with the city coming in at option number 5 in the Benesh report. But over the course of many years, that yields us $1.3 million, and there's still $11 million on the $12 million mark that needs to be determined. That needs to be determined by the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, how that's going to work. I am sure that plan is forthcoming, but it's not on our radar sites today. And so it's been an agonizing decision for me as well as chairman. But I see, honestly and truly, I would see that there would be a pathway forward to move this forward. But the answers that we would need to make this all really be synergetic would not only be with what the developer's coming up, and I think we all need to understand that this developer coming forth and saying they would be willing to go over and above to see this happen. We understand that hey, that's helpful. But then again, the bottom line is it's a corridor that is used not just by Forest Park residents. It's used by everybody in the entirety on Saundersville Road. And so it becomes a wider global problem. And I think in our traffic study hearing that we had, or the work session, one of the points that was brought out, even if this funding were to go forward, that there are other projects within the city of Hendersonville, road projects that this body may or may not have purview over. We obviously put together a traffic corridor plan from this body, but the funding of that is the alderman. It's the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. It's the elected officials, not the appointed ones. So, I would say that everything that has been mentioned with this motion, I would say that it's consistent with the commissioner's feelings, and at this point, we just need to see what the will of the commission is. We do have a motion on the floor in a second, and hearing no other commissioners, unless anybody else wants to speak. Well, we'll do it the traditional way first, and if it seems to be muddied, we will take a roll call, okay? All in favor to recommend denial of the Forest Park plan indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed to the motion to deny, say no.
No.
Okay? Let it reflect that the motion to deny passed and that there was one no vote. Okay, so we'll move on now to the next thing on the agenda is Main Street climate control. But Mr. Lucky, I want to get you, look, are you sure? Oh, well, I think we're fixing to have an exodus here. Yeah. And once again, thank you, Commission, for allowing us a little bit of license here. But I wanted to get these minutes in front of all of our faces so that we would have a better idea of what that meeting was. And so I appreciate your indulgence. So, Mr. Lucky, if you would go back, we're going to come back now to Hunt Club number 9. And I'm reading through, I've read through this, and so if I understand this right, what we have here is Mr. Boyd, you are reading into this transcript that there is a payment in lieu of option.
Yes, I can read.
Yeah.
I can kind of read what Will said in the minutes from the last meeting about this. Let's see. So in exchange for relocating and removing some sections of those trails, we've worked with the applicant, working towards extending the trail system off-site towards Jack Anderson. We're discussing whether payment in lieu of and some help on the design would be appropriate. That's the applicant's preference. And then it goes on to state that they don't, control the property, and I think that's why the payment in lieu would be preferable. But
okay, let me direct you a little bit further down, and let me get your response on this. And it's on the flip side of the page, and I see here where Ms. McCormick actually made the motion on this. But it says, correct, but when we design the phase that connects to Chute Lane, we'll design the walking trail at that point. The city can use that to work with the county and school system to do with what they like.
And going on to Key's comment, we didn't know, I guess I wasn't sure, and this is why we brought it back before Planning Commission, to be completely sure that the Planning Commission was making the decision to accept the design of that trail instead of receiving the payment in lieu.
Okay.
There's some, after we read it several times, there's confusion on our part, and we just wanted to be to be doubly sure we weren't making a decision that went counter to what the Planning Commission wanted.
Ms. McCormick, do you remember anything about this? So we could deal with so many of these things.
I barely remember breakfast.
We weren't sure that if she was approving, like Will's comments, if that was what she was thinking she was approving, or if it was what Mr. Gentry was kind of alluding to. Yeah.
Sure.
Even before that, when Bob was the chairman, Bob Frudenthal was the chairman, you see his comment, he went back, Fred made no additional comments, Bob made some comments, then he made, and with respect to the trail, you have offered design services or what? Yes, sir. That's what he's offered.
Design services.
Design services.
Right.
You really don't have that property you can't control, correct, but when we design the phase that connects to Chute Lane, then the motion was made. I mean, there's no ambiguity on our part.
I'm looking at the transcript, and I'm seeing what I see, and as to the payment in lieu of the design, I'm not sure we've seen the total design.
I'm sorry, we've submitted that with our construction plans that we submitted in May.
We might have looked at it, but I don't know if we went over it that night.
Oh, y'all wouldn't have. It would have been the preliminary plat. It
Yeah.
wouldn't have been.
Yeah. So, So in that case, commission, the question is do we go for a payment in lieu of, or accept the design as stated in the motion and go forward?
Well, my question, Mr. Chairman, is that we're just talking about item number 3 on the Public Works comment? Is that what we're talking about?
Right now, that's all we're talking about is item,
Is
no,
it
I'm sorry, item 2.
Yes.
Two.
Item 2.
And if you notice under item 2, it doesn't even say anything about payment in lieu of. It says approved minutes from 5/3/16. Agendas state the walking trail must be extended to Jack Anderson. That's completely incorrect.
Yeah.
Because it could never have been extended to Jack Anderson. We don't own the property and it's in the county.
If it had been within the right-of-way, I think it may have been able to be extended, but I don't know if it could be built within the right-of-way.
You've already got a question about how wide the right-of-way is.
Right. Right. I don't know if it's wide enough to.
We couldn't
to
give
put
you
it-
the right-of-way there anyway. We
Right.
don't own the property.
Right.
There's no ambiguity on our part.
Right. Ms. McCormick?
Okay, I think for me, I'm just trying to make sure I sort out the issues. It seems that what Mr. Gentry was talking about, or as best I remember, and I'm just reading this because I was listening to the Forest Park presentation, but it seems that I got the impression reading this that once you guys got to the Chutes Lane section, that you would basically be dealing with a walking trail that would kind of marry or hybrid the issues that staff raised. Is that not what your understanding of it was, or what you're saying that you guys are not willing to do at this point?
No. We were willing to do exactly what we agreed to. This was the preliminary plat approval. When that's approved, there was a traffic study requested. We did that. We submitted that. We went ahead and developed the construction plans, submitted those for design review, which they've had since May. And we included in that set of design documents the design for the walking trail. What you approved in May was where the walking trails were going to go, which was in that preliminary plat submittal. Final master plan submittal. And then Cal, if you want to try, Cal's here, he can answer your question, but I think that we've agreed and are willing to do everything that we agreed
plan.
or were willing to do then.
Yeah.
We're just saying that
Okay.
this changed from then to now.
All right. Cal?
Yes.
Real quickly.
Cal Gentry, Southeastern Building. Reading through this transcript, what I recall was we agreed to provide the design of the trail from the edge of our property to Jack Anderson Elementary School when we designed this Phase 9 that ties to Chutes Lane. It states it pretty clear. I say when we're going to design that phase when it connects to Chutes Lane, Ms. Bryant McCormick, you said a lot of those answers. Move the accepted proposal is, Mr. Frudenthal clarified. Does this include an offer of assistance on the trail only, which would mean our offer to design was the assistance? Brian McCormick, yes. Frudenthal, so if a motion to accept developer's offer on the trail, which is to design the trail. And I apologize, Mr. Lucky was at the podium. I had that conversation that night, but that was my understanding, is we would design the off-site section and build the on-site section.
That appears to be what the agreement was.
Okay.
So, so then in that case, going down to the agenda, when we're looking at this, that would take care of item number, what? Item number two. And then 3 and 8, payment in lieu of, that would kind of negate that.
No, the payment in lieu, I'm sorry, I can
ahead.
answer
Yeah.
if you'd like me to. The payment in lieu of is for the curb and gutter. There wouldn't be a sidewalk required because we've agreed to do the walking trail across the frontage. And I'm sorry, 3 and 8, and provide well, he's, 8 is negated based upon, we've already provided the traffic study. We agreed to do everything in the traffic study, which I think Marshall's in agreement with us doing. And our point is if we're doing what's required in the traffic study, we're putting in the 3-stop intersection with the signal, with flashers, and the phase adjacent to this did not pay the in lieu of for the improvement to the road. And what we were saying is why are we required to when the adjacent section wasn't?
Okay. All right. Mr. Lee.
Well, I guess, but the payment in lieu is a standard requirement that we have. Although I do understand, Mr. Lucky, in the previous, maybe it was not enforced, but this is not anything new, like some of the other items we've been talking about that we're really not agreed upon.
It's not been applied evenly.
Yes.
Okay. Have we got a, Mr. Boyd, have you guys talked about a figure here?
Yes, we have. I gave Cal a figure before the meeting. It's roughly $68,000 that would cost to kind of bring that up to our city standard. They have almost 700 feet of road frontage on Shoot Lane.
Okay. All right. Do I have a motion?
Oh, there's...
You got comment number 3, and we talked about that, and comment number 8, really the traffic study?
Yes, and the only other one, they've requested the walking trail in the community is schematically designed, was approved with the master plan at 8-9 feet. They've requested that we install a TDOT approved walking trail on our property that's 12 feet wide. Just because in case TDOT comes over to Shoot Lane and grants the city money one day to provide a bike ped path down there that's 50% wider than what's in the rest of the community.
Okay.
I mean, this just kind of came up with these sets of comments just out of, this never come up before.
All right, so the dimension, on the plan, the walking trail was how wide again? That was submitted and approved?
Originally, it was 8 feet.
8 feet, and they're asking for 4 more feet, or
12 feet, yes.
Yeah, 4 feet.
It's as wide as a drive lane.
All right, and on that particular point, Mr. Boyd, what's our rationale of asking for that?
I could be mistaken, but I want to say, and Timothy, I might be wrong about this, but I thought the original plan had 10, was there a 10-foot trail in other sections of Hunt Club that was approved?
The only other existing trails that are in place now are 10 feet. They might be 9 feet. They're between 9 and 10.
Okay. What we allowed was the trails within the subdivision to go down to 8 feet, and then to have the trail along Shoot Lane to be 12 feet, just so if there's ever a chance in the future to apply for federal funding to extend our greenway system, we would be able to connect into that and receive federal funding. So.
Okay. All right. Anything else, Mr. Lucky?
I think that's it. Thank you.
All right. Do we have a motion? Mr. Lee.
Mr. Chairman, I would move approval of this final plat with conditions of Public Works item number 3 and number 1 that we are recommending that they be included in the approval, conditionally on the approval.
Okay, does everybody copy that? Got a motion, do we have a second? Mr. Millsap seconds. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries, so ordered. We've already dealt with it.
No, I just want to make sure that we...
Items number 3, yeah, okay, items number 3 will be included, and items number 1, okay, into the consideration.
And item number 2 is excluded.
Yes, yes, it is. Yes,
Okay.
it is. So I was looking at the worded.
I just wanted to make sure, we're trying to make sure that we document and everything's good going forward.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Okay, we're moving on now to Main Street climate control, self-storage. Do I have a representative from, okay, come on up, and who's handling this one?
Timothy.
Timothy, Mr. Witten.
This project is located just down the road from City Hall on the opposite side of Main Street, between Simmons Bank and Regions Bank. The subject lot is one of two that make up the Jack Alexander planned development, which is zoned Office PD. The current master plan that shows two buildings for office-type development could also be used for general personal services, which are things like a funeral home, clothing alterations, training school, such as a barber shop or cosmetology, barber school or cosmetology school. The applicant would like to put a self-storage facility on the east lot. This is not allowed in office zoning, so he's proposing to amend the preliminary master plan and change the zoning on this one lot to GCPD, which does allow self-storage. Other than the addition of self-storage, all of the other uses remain the same as on the current plan, except that the general personal services would be eliminated as a use for this one lot. All the lots on the south side of the Main Street block from Maple Road Boulevard east, going east over to Maple Drive, are zoned Office PD, except for Regions Bank, which is GC. Everything on the north side of East Main Street is General Commercial PD, and everything on the south side is Residential Subdivision SR1. The building is being designed to look like an office building so that it would sort of fit in with the overall office concept there within that block. The applicants have agreed to all staff comments.
Okay. If you would, just introduce yourself and tell us more about your plan. Go ahead.
My name's Don Williams. I'm with Gresham Smith and Partners. I'm a civil engineer on this project. First of all, I want to thank the staff for their help with getting us here tonight. They've been a pleasure to work with. I think we've responded to all the staff comments, and as Timothy mentioned a minute ago, we're in agreement with all of those comments. There is one comment that I wanted to speak to tonight. When we got the initial list of comments from the fire marshal, we didn't clearly understand one of the comments, that being the fire access roads requirement to be within 150 feet of any point on the building. The code provides the fire marshal the ability to extend that an additional 150 feet when the building has sprinkler systems. In my experience, that condition has always been granted. I respect and appreciate the fire marshal's comment, and I appreciate that it's his authority to make that, and we're in agreement with that comment. I just want to clarify that because that affects the site plan. In order to accommodate that requirement, we have to reduce the footprint of the building. And we look forward to working with him, and he and I have spoke on the phone about the various options that we have about how we can accommodate that. So I don't have any concerns at all that we can come back with a reduced footprint site plan on the final submittal that will resolve that one remaining issue. I just wanted to bring that up because the final is going to be a little bit different than the preliminary because of that.
Yes, it'll just take into account the smaller footprint of the building and then, of course, the accommodation for the fire.
For the fire truck, the access and the maneuverability around the building, correct.
Okay.
So we were a little bit blindsided by the opposition that spoke at the public hearing. We were not aware that we had people who were opposed to our project. We think we've got a great project and that it's appropriate at this location. I'm sure many of you know that there's a growing need for storage facilities throughout the country, certainly here in Nashville. I've worked on one recently in Nashville, and for the past 3 or 4 years, I've had a number of people come to me, and we've looked for locations for these type facilities. These facilities are changing as well to what most people are used to. You know, this is a very nice, attractive-looking building. It's air-conditioned. It has security cameras. It's a pretty good neighbor. The one that we had approved in Nashville, one of the positive things about it was that the security cameras provided an extra layer of security to the neighborhood. I'm concerned about the fact that we're talking about what was raised tonight was an agreement that was made over 30 years ago with the neighborhood, and that this property hasn't developed over that full amount of time. And here we are with you tonight with a need that we think meets your citizen, a need that your citizens have, and that we have the right site to meet that need. Having said that, however, and I'm not, pardon me for not being completely clear on your procedures, but it may be appropriate for us to take a deferral tonight to have the opportunity to sit down with the people who have raised this opposition and try and talk to them about what we're proposing and why we think it's a benefit to the neighbors. I'm also concerned about a petition that gets signed. What were those people told about our project, and where did they get their information? And so I'm kind of left with mixed feelings. You know, I feel like I've got a great project. I thought this was pretty much rote. We were going to come up here, thank the staff, thank you for your appreciation, for your attention to this, and come back and work out the final details. If there are concerns about this project, though, we would like to have an opportunity to speak with those people, and we would accept a deferral to give us that opportunity if you felt it was necessary.
Would you like to make that request?
Yes, sir.
Okay, we have a request from the applicant to defer for 30 days, our next Planning Commission meeting on the 1st of...
Yes, sir.
Okay, first week of...
First week of October.
October, yeah. I figure what month this is. Any problem with that? Okay, we have a motion. Can someone make that motion that we defer? Mr. Lee makes the motion, second by Mr. Corbick. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carries. You're deferred.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item is the Hendersonville Utility District, Indian Lake Village, Phase 5A Water Tower. This is more of a formality than anything else, but it's already underway. Do I have a motion? Move to approve. Mr. Pinson, second. Second, Mr. Stringfellow. All in favor say aye. Aye. All right. Funny story real quick about this one right here. This water tower that's being built is literally across the bypass from our church. And so I walk in one morning and I hear this tapping, and I'm thinking pipes are broken. I'm thinking something's going on, and I couldn't find it. I mean, I'm looking everywhere for it, and come to find out, it sounded like it was in my attic. Come to find out, it was all the way across the bypass. It was them building that water tower, and they were tapping rock in there. And I was going, I can't even believe it. But just thought of that. Site plans, the Jamie Spurlock property, parking lot addition. Do we have a representative there? And who's handling this one, Mr. Freed? Mr. Whitten.
This is sort of a kind of a corrective action, but this lot's located at 214 Molly Walton Drive, next to Storage Port. It is zoned industrial. Mr. Spurlock added about 60 parking spaces behind the storage port. Didn't realize that he needed to have site plan approval before he did that. So that's what he's doing tonight. He is asking for a couple of waivers. First one is a request for a waiver from the requirement to provide a landscape plan and from the requirement to install such landscaping. If the landscape plan were done, it would amount to about 8 trees required. Which there isn't opportunity to plant those trees in the new parking lot because of the TVA easement, but there is room to plant that elsewhere on the site. And the second waiver he's requesting is from the requirement that each chain link fencing be vinyl coated. He's already installed galvanized chain link fencing. There's a lot of existing chain link fencing in that same area that's been there for a long time. So he's requesting that waiver. I'd also point out that all of this, again, is behind the storage port, so the chain link fencing is not visible.
Okay. All right. Just introduce yourself and.
My name is Andy Leith with Greenwood Design. I'm representing Mr. Spurlock. Mr. Spurlock's here, is the owner. Timothy is correct in what he's saying. We're asking for those two waivers. This site was essentially overflow outdoor storage for the mini storage facility, and then Mr. Spurlock bought it, converted it to a parking lot for his fleet vehicles.
All right. Do we have any have a motion or any questions for move to approve? Ms. Atchley, so second. Move with the waivers.
Yes.
With the waivers. Okay. Do we have a second? Second, Ms. Stringfellow. Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed?
Not opposed, but just to clarify, is she granting?
Both waivers.
Granting both waivers?
Both
Okay.
waivers, yeah.
You
She's got her head cold going on.
Thank you.
You approve, thank you. All right, sketch plats, there are none. Preliminary plats, Falcon Ridge. Anybody here for that? Who's handling this one, Mr. Free?
That's me.
Okay, Mr. Free.
What this is Falcon Ridge subdivision was the current preliminary plat expired on this about a year ago, and it was not extended. Request was not received to extend it. This project was actually the preliminary development plan was originally approved in 2006 as the Drake's Manor. Hold on a second. In 2014. Prior to this was actually a totally different development called Drake's Manor. Then that kind of went away, and they started anew with Falcon Ridge, and the preliminary development plan was approved in 2014, and then a final development plan was approved also in 2014. And then they actually submitted and got approved for a preliminary plat in 14 and submitted construction plans later that year. There actually just was never a final plat that has been submitted for Falcon Ridge. And so what the owner is looking to do today is to grant an extension to that. Typically, these extensions would occur before the time runs out, but there's nothing in the zoning ordinance that would keep the commission from granting an extension actually after the fact. Since this was just about a year ago and all of it was approved around 3 years ago, felt this was something that could be brought before the commission to consider.
Okay. Please introduce yourself.
My name is Brian Carroll. I represent the owner of the property. And we agree with all the staff comments on everything, and we're just asking for your approval of the extension.
Okay. One of the things is if we grant the one-year extension, it would probably have to be stipulated that with the extension, that everything would be built according to new regulations and standards. Are you okay with that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And enacted, okay, for preliminary approval. You're okay with all that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. We have a motion.
Move to approve.
We move by Mr. Lee, seconded by Mr. Pinson. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have two rezoning requests. The first one is on 101 Tennessee Way. This is on the south side of Volunteer Drive and east of Tennessee Way. We have heard there was no comments on the public hearing. Do we have a motion on that? Move to approve, Ms. Stringfellow. Any second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Atchley. Any more discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Second one is 8 and 13 Industrial Park Boulevard rezoning request, F&M Investments and Seaside Investments. We have rezoned there to, once again, we had nobody speak on that one. Do I have a motion on that one? Mr. Bristol, any second? Ms. Ashley seconds. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Any opposed? We're approved. We have a staff-approved project, Gene Brown Elementary School. It's contingent on some Public Works comment. And so they're going to ensure that detention pond grading will provide positive drainage. We have a resolution here, Resolution 2017-07, a resolution serving as a report to the Hendersonville Board of Mayor and Aldermen of the proposed plan of services for the proposed annexation of Eagle View subdivision located on the east side of New Shackle Island Road north of the Willow Park Circle. Do I have a motion?
Move to accept
Move. Okay, we move to accept that resolution. Ms. McCormick, second. Mr. Bristol, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, it is approved. Update on Hendersonville Horizons, Mr. Free.
Real quick update on Hendersonville Horizons, and Dr. Lee and Frank are serving on that Hendersonville Horizons. We're nearing the completion of that. The working groups have completed their meetings, and the steering committee has now reconvened, and they're working on the final goals and strategies, and we're hopeful that over a meeting or two in the next few weeks, we will have something to submit to BOMA for their consideration. And it's basically a vision of goals and strategies for the next 10 to 15 years for the city to tackle. And I don't know if Dr. Lee or Mr. Pinson has anything to add to that. Okay, good deal.
And those will be coming before the commission as well, obviously?
Yes, we'll be doing a report to the commission as well.
Okay, thank you. What about the discussion on the Glenbrook pavers, Mr. Boyd?
Yes, several months ago, we spoke about the possibility of replacing the pavers with a stamped concrete product, and after looking at it and talking with the developer of the bank, it's really not a viable option due to the cost of that. Just kind of give you some history. The pavers, I think, were installed as an amenity, as a part of the original zoning document when Glenbrook was approved. Moving forward over the past several years after it was installed, they have repaired those pavers when needed. And moving through the committees, the Public Works Committee, we tried to, the developer, they have fixed everything we've asked them to. The Public Works Committee they're not fond of the pavers, but they're considered an amenity, and it's the responsibility of the association to maintain those indefinitely for the life of the paver. So what we're asking you tonight is to allow the street acceptance to move forward, with the pavers installed, and knowing that the property association will maintain those. And Mr. Bill Fuson is here from representing the developer to answer any questions you might have, but that's all we're asking.
Okay.
I would just open it up. I mean, I agree with Coleman, or Marshall, what we've talked about so far with the city is that this plat was approved in 2001 with this amenity in there, and it truly was not a very good design. But what we're asking for is acceptance and dedication of the roadway. The Owners Association has a clear obligation under what is called the Property Owners Maintenance Agreement, as well as all the plats, to maintain those pavers indefinitely. It's on every document that's of record right now. And we're asking for a release of our bond and then the acceptance of the roadway into the city.
Thank you. I'm going to yield to Mr. Free just for a second. I need for you to, I don't see any document in front of me or any resolution or any acceptance agreement.
Yeah. This was...
it was on the agenda several months ago. Well, I'll go ahead and take it.
Yeah. I think it was on the agenda several months ago, and it was approved, but with the condition that the pavers remain. And I think the idea then was the city would accept the whole thing. And then now I think, and tell me if I'm wrong, Marshall, what Marshall's saying is he still wants to move forward with the acceptance, but excluding the pavers. Is that correct?
That's correct.
because the HOA will maintain, they would stay, but the HOA would maintain that responsibility.
Okay, my question is what did we do, if that was on the agenda several months ago, what did we do with that piece of business? Did we vote on that?
Well, I don't think there was a vote. I think Mr. Friedenthal instructed me to pursue the stamped concrete, and we pursued that. It's not, it's astronomical cost to try to install that in this area, so it's not feasible. So.
Okay. Right. So what do we? I think what we need to do to make it all right is we need to have a formal document in front of us for acceptance of those streets and the language before us. And on the rationale behind that, folks, is simply, it was on the agenda. There seems to be that there was we kind of said, let's push it down the road a little bit, find out about the stamped concrete versus the pavers. I think it'd be a cleaner transaction if we could do it that way. So we'll.
No, it's I'll resubmit the same information I had last time, and we'll get that go. Yeah,
We'll get it in a formal document.
Yeah, we'll get into formal documents, so we'll have it on record.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, one question. What's the trigger to make the homeowners or the property owner association do the repair work?
Well, it would involve staff calling the association to make them do the repair work.
Okay. So that would be the trigger. I think you need to stipulate that clearly.
Right, yeah.
So they understand when you're discontent, they have to work.
Yeah.
Who's actually?
Why in the world would we keep putting these things back in when they don't work?
Yeah.
I mean, I'd rather see pavement there, and Mr. Lucky, who was here earlier, is getting ready to build, he is building buildings right there, so the second you turn in Glenbrook, you're going to have right back out and then a right lane. It does not make any sense to me at all to put these back in. The fact that they were amenity, then maybe we could find a replacement and just put asphalt down and be done with this.
Does the property owner association have the right to do that?
No, not now. But I might recommend that come in the form of a proposal.
We explored trying to find another amenity, and I think the stamped concrete.
I'm not advocating the stamped concrete. All I'm saying is that turn takes so much pounding going in and out. I don't think anything's ever going to stay there except asphalt.
Yeah.
Unless you want him to put a strip of concrete in just there, and that's not going to look very good. But in terms of amenities, I think there are some other things that might be offered up and just get this thing done. Just a thought.
Hold on one second. Go ahead.
Summer 2000, we just recently closed the last of 2 lots that we own out there. We now only own Lot 7, which is the marquee lot right there at the entrance from New Shackle Island Road. So our involvement in that project, and I've only been involved in it since 2013. I mean, we're done with that project, and there's a whole body of owners out there and an association that managed that. And up until 2014, I don't think it was very well managed. I'm not defending that. It is now. Vasson Realty now has the management contract with the association. They're also the largest landowner out there, so they have a vested interest in pursuing and maintaining those pavers and those intersections. There's 3 intersections out there.
Okay, so the bottom line is for us to get a document in place if we want to go back to that association and see if they would make a proposal to amend that. I think it'd be well worth that to even just make a poll of that association. But at least by the next meeting, let's have a proposal in place so get the bond released. So we can do that.
That's a cash bond too. That's the other. It's not just a letter of credit. It's a cash bond.
Yeah.
So we'd like to get that money back.
Yeah. So either way, whether we're going to do the pavers or whether we're going to do something else, and I really do believe Ms. Atchley's right. I think that if we're going to do this, we ought to go ahead and build it to where it'll last. And the big question I would have is what particular vendor out there would be against that? Seriously. I really don't. So.
Well, I think
but that's not our thing to decide. It's theirs. That's theirs. Yeah. All right. Thank you very much.
So you're deferring it for one meeting?
One meeting. So we'll come back together in October.
Okay.
All right. Anything else? Mr. Millsaps.
Chairman, I move we adjourn.
Do I have a second? Second. We are adjourned.